Cruise ships are usually seen as happy, luxurious, and the perfect escape. But what if I told you that behind the laughter, the music, and the fresh ocean breeze, something much darker hides? These stories aren't made up. They are real, verified, and unforgettable. Each one comes from true events, backed by personal accounts in communities like Reddit. Tonight, you'll hear 5 of the scariest cruise ship horror stories ever shared, each one pulling you deeper into the shadows of the sea. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and get ready. Untold Happenings is this. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, what country are you watching from? I'd love to know where our viewers are tuning in. And if you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Story 1. The atrium lights hummed with a low mechanical buzz, and the whole ship smelled faintly of salt and old coffee. For a moment, I thought the entire ship was holding its breath, waiting for something only it seemed to know. My name is Ethan R. Malalari. I'm 34 years old, and I work as an assistant archivist in Providence, Rhode Island. People laugh when I say my job title, because to most it just sounds like I spend all day filing boxes. But I've always been careful with details, old handwriting, footnotes, gaps in records that nobody else notices. That's how I am. It's also why I booked this cruise. My sister Sarah passed away last winter after a short illness, and the silence in my home became unbearable. I thought a week at sea would help me breathe again. I wanted quiet, a wide horizon, not parties or noise. When I stepped onto the Ocean Valiant, everything felt too polished, almost staged. Smiles that never changed, uniforms perfectly pressed. My stateroom on Deck 7 had a heavy sliding door that rattled with the engine's rhythm and a small balcony. I remember staring at the bright orange life preserver hanging on the beige wall longer than I should have. It felt like a warning. The first strange thing happened as soon as we left port. The loudspeakers played the standard instructions, but the captain's voice cut off mid-sentence, leaving only static, then silence. No repeat, no apology. Everyone else ignored it, but it stuck with me. Later by the pool, I noticed a child's shoe left behind. Its laces were stiff with salt, the leather cracked from the sun. No one claimed it. No one even looked at it, not even the crew. That night in the dining hall, I saw a man sitting at the corner table. His skin was dark, his hair thinning, his eyes sharp like a scanner. His smile didn't match the seriousness in his gaze. As I passed, he whispered low, "Keep your door on the chain." It sounded like advice, hidden in a joke. Back in my cabin, I found a typewritten note pushed under my door. Plain white paper, no name, but it felt cold, like it had been in a freezer. I told myself not to overthink it. Shoes get lost, speakers fail, notes can be pranks. But when I headed to breakfast the next morning, I saw a maintenance notice pinned near the stairs. It listed repair schedules dated June 14th, but it was August. When I asked a steward, he smiled quickly, said it was a printing mistake, and ripped it down before I could look again. I told myself grief makes omens out of nothing. Still, I began writing dates and details in a notebook, my archivist instinct. That night, the casino was alive with laughter, but my deck was too quiet when I returned. On the cabin across from mine, a paper was taped to the door. The ink had been scraped away, leaving only grooves. Later, as I sat in bed with the TV on for company, there were 3 slow taps on my door. Not loud, not desperate, measured. I froze, then looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, lit only by the dim glow of the emergency light. It felt wider than it should have been, emptier. I stayed awake until sunrise, the chain on my door locked tight. The cruise went on with karaoke, shuffleboard, endless banquets. But the sense of being watched never left me. The sneaker by the pool was still there. When I asked a lifeguard about it, He shrugged, muttered something about lost property, and hurried away. That's when I saw the black and white photo. A family stood on the deck, the kind of picture you'd expect to find in an attic. Across the bottom in shaky handwriting, someone had written, "Don't let it out." The ink was fresh. Other passengers walked right by it as if it didn't exist. I slipped the photo into my pocket. That night, the ship's engine shook so hard I felt it in my teeth. I dreamed of a face pressed against my balcony door, black water beyond, hallways looping back on themselves endlessly. When I woke, the chain on my door was unlatched. I knew I had locked it. The chain requires effort, lifting, angling, sliding. It wasn't possible it came loose by accident. My chest tightened as I stared at it dangling. The next morning, the halls were bright, but strangely empty. Most passengers were still at breakfast, so I wandered past souvenir shops and maps. That's when I saw it, a service door left slightly open. A faint smell of diesel and lemon cleaner drifted out. Inside stretched a narrow maintenance tunnel, pipes hissing, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My archivist side won over my fear, and I stepped in. A black marker line snaked along the floor like a crude map. I followed it until I reached a heavy gray door. A paper tag hung on the handle. Maintenance. Do not enter. But written over it in pen were 3 words. Remember the light. My hands shook. I backed out quickly and blended back into the passengers. Later that day, a woman in her 50s leaned on the railing near me. Her face was pale, her eyes red and sleepless. She whispered that her husband had gone out for a smoke during the night and never returned. The crew told her he was drunk, wandered, maybe fell overboard. They asked her to stay calm and gave her spa vouchers. She gripped a pack of cigarettes so tight the cardboard bent. People do fall from ships, I reminded myself. But her face, her fear, reminded me of the note I'd found. That night at 3 a.m., I heard music in the stairwell. Faint, childlike, a lullaby. The kids' club was closed. There were no footsteps, no lights. Barefoot, I stood in the hall, my ear pressed against the cold metal wall. The music spun slowly, then stopped mid-phrase. After that, I carried my notebook everywhere. Crew members noticed but always looked away quickly, as if afraid. The man who warned me about the chain didn't appear at breakfast. His napkin was folded perfectly, his seat empty. When I asked, the waiter told me, "Sir, he checked out early, but we were still at sea." I tried to act normal that day, joining trivia, watching a poolside movie, playing shuffleboard. But every laugh, every clink of glasses felt rehearsed, as if the whole ship was performing. At one point, without realizing, I said aloud, "If you're listening, take a second to subscribe to Untold Happenings. It helps keep stories like this alive." I laughed at myself nervously, because humor was the only thing stopping me from panicking. But that night, another note slid under my door. It read, "Don't go to FT." I clutched it all night. The next morning, I pushed myself to dig deeper. I went back to the maintenance corridor. This time, the marker line bent around a corner I hadn't seen before. The lights flickered so badly it looked like the walls were breathing. At the end stood a small, round hatch, dented and scratched from years of use. From the other side came a faint sound. Not engines, not machines, but something like chanting, rhythmic. Then it shifted into the steady stomping of dozens of feet. My heart pounded. Then silence. I leaned closer and saw scratches carved into the paint. Words, or almost words, gouged in sharp strokes, deliberate, but not deep enough to read. A warning had been scratched there too, though faint, as if someone had tried to write it but stopped. I turned away quickly. Upstairs on a bench near the wash area, I noticed a neatly folded towel. Inside it was a small note, the words shaky and uneven. "He won't wake." I stuffed it into my pocket before anyone else could see. When I passed by later, the towel was gone, as if it had never been there. That evening, the captain's voice came over the loudspeakers. Calm, steady, practiced. He said there would be a silent memorial for a passenger who had tragically lost their life. His words felt too polished, too careful, almost like a cover for something darker. No name was given, no details, just that phrase. People whispered quietly. Some even cried alone, but most went back to eating at the buffet like nothing had happened. The sun was going down as I walked along the outer deck, the wind pulling at my jacket, the horizon glowing a sharp red. A deck chair caught my eye with a magazine resting on it. Flipping it open, I found another Polaroid tucked between the glossy pages. The photo showed a woman, but her face had been cut out, carved away so harshly that only the blank outline remained. At the bottom, written in pen, were the words, "The cabin changes." When I looked up, the chair was empty, the magazine gone. Just the sound of the wind remained. It felt like the ocean valiant was hiding its secrets the way smugglers hide stolen goods. And I was starting to think those secrets were meant only for me. By the third night, sleep was my enemy. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady hum of the engines, wondering if that sound was masking quieter sounds, human ones. At 3 a.m., I woke to the faint scrape of metal. At first, I thought it came from the balcony, but when I approached, I saw the glass was fogged over as though someone had been breathing on it. I froze, staring into the black water, until movement flickered in the mirror behind me. I spun around just in time to catch a darting shadow vanish. My heart slammed in my chest. The door was locked, the chain still fastened, yet I knew I hadn't been alone in that room. By morning, the ship was full of whispers about another missing passenger. A woman in her early 20s had gone out with friends to the bar and never returned. Security brushed it off with a rehearsed tone, suggesting maybe she left the ship at the last port. But we were days away from the next stop. Their explanation floated in the air like fog, too thin to believe. Groups of passengers whispered nervously, casting glances at staff who rushed by without a word. What unsettled me most was how many crew members avoided eye contact completely, as if answering questions itself broke some unspoken rule. That afternoon, I hid in the library. Dusty atlases, worn-out novels, shelves of forgotten travel guides. Between two books, I found a maintenance log, its pages yellowed and smelling faintly of mildew. One entry made my stomach tighten. Written in pen on a single line were the words, 90. The transfer has begun. No explanation, no name, just that. I folded the page into my notebook. As I left, I noticed the widow whose husband had disappeared days earlier. She sat silently by the window, no longer crying, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her eyes were far away, as if she had accepted something unavoidable. That night was the grand supper. The dining hall glittered under chandeliers, waiters gliding with trays of wine, and jazz music filling the room. But it all felt hollow. I glanced toward the table where the tan man had sat, the one who warned me about the chain. His chair had remained empty for days. Tonight, however, someone else sat there, a stranger, smiling as if he had always belonged. The lights flickered once, only once, but long enough to silence the room. When I looked down, I froze. A small white tag had appeared neatly on my plate. My name was written on it in black ink. No one close enough to have placed it there. My hand shook as I slipped it into my pocket and excused myself. The air in the halls afterward felt thick, like the walls were sweating. Maybe I was reckless, but I remembered the note's warning. Don't go to FT, and yet my steps carried me toward the stern. Maybe I was desperate to prove I wasn't imagining all of it. The farther I went, the fewer passengers I saw. Music from the gala faded into muffled echoes. Ahead, I noticed a door cracked open. A narrow stairwell led downward. The smell hit first, diesel, salt, and a faint, sweet odor that reminded me of burnt plastic. I went slowly, the wooden steps creaking beneath me. At the bottom, my breath turned white in the freezing air. A refrigerated hold stretched out, lined with stacks of crates, their dates painted on: 1999, 2003. Ice clung to the lids. I brushed one clean and froze. Instead of cargo, a person's name was painted on the wood, a passenger's name, one that matched someone listed as missing. In the silence, faint music played, a music box, almost out of tune. I followed the sound until I found a small brass toy sitting on a crate. The moment I touched it, the tune stopped. Behind me, something moved. A childlike shadow flickered across the frozen wall. My throat went dry. My pulse hammered. But no one was there. I staggered back up the stairs. At the top, a crew member stood waiting, his expression calm, too calm, practiced. He put a hand on my shoulder, firm, almost fatherly. "You shouldn't be down there," he said. His grip tightened. "Why not?" I demanded. His smile stayed the same as he let go, turning away. "Because the ship remembers." His footsteps faded into the echo of the engines. That night, I barricaded the door with a chair and fastened the chain. I didn't sleep. I listened to every groan, every knock. Just before dawn, exhaustion pulled me under. A sound woke me, the sharp click of a camera shutter. I opened my eyes to an empty room, but on the bedside table sat a fresh Polaroid. It was me, asleep in my bed. The photo was still damp. My chest went cold. Whoever took it had been in the room, standing right where I was looking. I searched every corner, opened drawers, pulled back curtains. Nothing. No footprints on the carpet. Just the photo. I slid it into my notebook, my hands shaking. I needed answers, even if I feared them. Morning came with forced cheer. A steel drum band clattered on deck. Staff pushed bingo tickets, voices too loud, too cheerful. But the passengers had changed, nervous, hushed, their eyes darting. I went to the front desk and demanded to see the captain. The clerk smiled politely, folding her hands. "The captain isn't available, sir." My voice cracked with anger. "Then explain the missing passengers. Explain who was in my room last night." Her smile didn't falter. "Perhaps you've had too much to drink." At sea, strange dreams happen. Disorientation, I leaned closer. "What about the notes?" "The pictures?" For the first time, her expression changed. Her eyes tensed, the smile slipping. She lowered her voice. "You've already been noted." Before I could ask what that meant, another staff member appeared and pulled her away. "Don't make it harder on yourself." In a daze, I wandered the halls. Announcements boomed with fake cheer, but the ship felt smaller, tighter. At the bar, a man dropped his drink, his eyes wide with panic before staff dragged him away. That night, I forced myself back to the rear corridors. The hatch to the refrigerated hold was now locked, sealed tight. But cold air still leaked from the edges. On the floor, a tag lay waiting. Unlike the last one, this one bore a number: 314, my cabin number. I staggered back in fear. When I entered my room, another Polaroid lay on the pillow. This one showed me in the hallway, staring at that hatch, notebook in hand. My blood ran cold. I fled to the upper deck. The sky was bruised red as the sun dipped, the sea restless. The widow stood by the railing again. Her lips moved silently like she was praying, but no words came. She looked at me, her eyes dark. "They keep us cataloged," she whispered. "We're just records." I demanded, "What do you mean?" Her voice cracked. "Once your tag appears, you've already been filed." Her shoulders shook as she turned and slipped into the line of passengers. My notebook felt heavier, like the evidence inside it had turned into a library ledger instead. That night I blocked my door again, but exhaustion still caught me. In the dark, I woke to footsteps inside my room. A shadow leaned over me, A hand pressed something cold against my chest, then pulled away. I smelled salt and old paper. I switched on the lamp. No one was there, but on my chest lay another tag, glossy white. This one had only 2 words: transfer complete. My throat closed. I ran to the balcony, gasping for air. The ocean stretched endlessly black, but in the reflection of the glass I saw not myself, but a blurred figure, eyes glowing like drowned stars. Morning came with an announcement. Calm, final, practiced. The observation is over. We appreciate your cooperation around me. Passengers ate breakfast, laughed, carried on. But no one looked at me. No one even noticed. Back in my cabin, the mirror above the sink was fogged, as if someone had breathed on it. My notebook sat on the desk, pages fluttering though no window was open. Slowly, letters appeared in the condensation, written by an unseen hand. Remember the light. My notebook slipped, scattering Polaroids across the carpet. Among them was one I had never seen. It showed the ship's hold, rows of frozen crates stacked high. On the closest one, written in black letters, was my full name. I blinked, stomach twisting, and when I looked again, the photo was gone. Just the empty carpet remained. But I know a crate is waiting for me somewhere, deep inside the frozen belly of the ocean Valiant, and I'm not sure if I've already been sealed inside it. Story 2. The cruise ship promised luxury, excitement, and the freedom of the open sea. For Sophia Clean, it was supposed to be a break from her fast-paced life in New York. She wanted quiet nights, ocean views, and peace. She booked a small stateroom alone on deck 7, but the moment she walked in, she felt it. Someone was standing outside her balcony door. The thermostat said 72, yet the room felt cold. The air was heavy, like invisible eyes were watching. She shook it off, unpacked her bags, and told herself it was just nerves. But by the second night, little things started happening. A faint humming in the hallway, too soft to place. Every time she pressed her ear to the door, the sound stopped. She blamed the ship's machines, though her gut whispered otherwise. Then came the first shadow. Just for a second, in the reflection of her mirror, she saw it, a shape behind her. But when she turned, only her own pale, tired face stared back. She laughed nervously, trying to dismiss it. Travel, stress, exhaustion. Her mind had to be playing tricks. However, it almost felt like the cabin was reacting to her movements. At night, her bag shifted on its own, and the lights flickered without reason. One morning, she woke to find her suitcase wide open, her clothes folded neatly inside, though she had never touched them. A heavy uneasiness crept over her that she could not shake. By the third night, the tension became unbearable. Sophia heard slow, steady footsteps pacing outside her cabin, heavy and deliberate. She opened the door to check, but the corridor was completely empty. Still, the faint smell of salt water and something sharp and metallic lingered in the air. Her pulse raced in her chest. This was no ordinary voyage. She caught sight of a tall, thin figure standing motionless in the hallway corner, head tilted as if studying her. The instant she blinked, it was gone. Then a faint whisper brushed her ear, soft but unsettling. "You don't belong here." The mix of dread and curiosity twisted inside her. Determined, Sophia decided to gather proof. She left her phone recording overnight. By morning, the footage showed her belongings shifting on their own, faint shapes gliding through the room, impossible blurs of motion she had not seen. The ship held secrets, she thought, perhaps memories of past passengers, trapped shadows, or something much darker. That night she explored the upper decks, following creaks and strange flickers. Every sound seemed like a clue. Fear gnawed at her, but her need to understand pushed her forward, deeper into the ship's mysteries. The next night was worse. The sense of being watched in her own room never left her. Every groan of the metal halls and whisper of wind felt amplified, almost intentional. She sat on her bed, replaying the eerie clips from her phone, her chest tight with fear. The blurred shapes she had captured seemed purposeful, like they were trying to speak. Finally, she stepped onto her balcony, the silver waves glistening beneath her. The stars stretched endlessly above, yet the horizon seemed strangely close. Just beyond the railing, a dark shape rippled across the water, moving in a way no current could explain. The second she blinked, it was gone. Inside, her lights began to flicker violently, plunging her cabin into sudden bursts of darkness. In the silence between flashes, she heard breathing, slow, heavy, not her own. The shadows along the walls stretched unnaturally, sliding toward her like smoke. Then came a loud banging from the neighboring cabin, sharp and demanding. Each time she approached, the sound stopped, only to start again when she stepped away. Pressing her ear to the wall, she froze. There were no voices, no footsteps, only a scraping noise like fingernails dragging over wood. Her mind raced back to the strange cruise forums she had read before booking, stories of missing passengers and ghostly figures seen by others. Was she living the same horror? She caught sight of a shadow peeling away from the hallway wall, forming into the shape of an older man in a faded uniform. His posture was strict, commanding, but his face was empty, blank. Sophia gasped, knocking over her chair as she stumbled back. When she looked again, the hallway was bare, yet her curiosity, sharper than her terror, drove her further. She carried her camera through the ship at night, recording empty stairwells, lounges, and forgotten corridors. What she found unsettled her more. Doors opening without anyone there, rooms that vanished when she returned, and fleeting figures in old-fashioned clothes fading away before she could reach them. Reviewing her footage, she saw something chilling. A brass handrail caught a reflection her eyes had missed. A small boy in a sailor outfit stood behind her, staring straight into the camera. She spun around, but no one was there. Then a whisper, nearly hidden within the breeze, brushed her ear. "Don't follow us." A cold shiver spread through her body. Sophia knew she had a choice. She could turn away, pretend none of this was happening, or she could go further, uncovering truths buried for decades. Fear and fascination tangled inside her, and in the end, her need to know won. Every night the ship grew bolder. Drawers opened on their own. Invisible hands tapped against the windows. Objects shifted across her desk without reason. The sounds she recorded were faint, almost hidden, but they carried a strange rhythm, an intelligence shaping the chaos. By the end of the week, she had hours of disturbing evidence, undeniable proof of something beyond normal. Yet she could not explain it. The ship wasn't only crossing oceans, it was caught between worlds. The whispers, the shapes, the echoes of past passengers all pointed to a haunting truth. Sophia felt the weight of something coming, a final revelation, and the thought made her tremble. The ship wasn't finished with her. As the journey neared its end, Sophia could barely rest. Every creak, every echo down the passageways pressed on her mind, as if the vessel itself was whispering warnings she could not understand. Gripping her camera, she wandered the empty halls at night, each step sounding too loud, each shadow stretching unnaturally. Passing the dining room, she stopped cold. The tables were perfectly set, silverware gleaming in the flicker of weak lights, plates waiting as if for guests who would never come. But the air carried a faint smell of rot. Her camera caught something more, the sound of voices layered over each other, faint laughter, murmurs of conversations that had ended long ago. Following the trail, she noticed small footprints pressed along the floor, leading toward the grand staircase. They were tiny, belonging to a child, but impossibly aged as though left years ago. Her hand shook as she touched the banister, a chill racing through her body when an invisible hand brushed her shoulder. She spun around. No one stood there. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Glancing into the mirrored panels along the wall, she saw them. Men in outdated uniforms, women in elegant gowns, children in sailor suits, faces blurred, watching her silently. Their stares felt like warnings. Leave now or stay forever. No words, just unspoken threats. She pressed on, her fear drowned by determination, moving toward the lower decks where the air felt heavier. The hum of the engines was louder here, the walls trembling as if alive. The doors rattled and opened at random, the floors groaning beneath her steps. She felt as if the ship itself was breathing around her. In the corner of the dim corridor, her flashlight landed on something strange, a leather-bound journal, untouched by time. Dust clung to it, but its pages were dry. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were frantic notes from decades past, tales of vanished passengers, strange visions, and warnings scrawled by a crew member. The entries grew more erratic, lines blurred with panic. Over and over, one message appeared. The ship chose who would disappear, slipping not only through seas, but through realities. As her eyes traced the final words, a voice rose suddenly, low and sharp, echoing across the metal walls. "You shouldn't be here." Sophia turned, her light cutting through the darkness. No one was there, yet the air grew colder all at once, and her breath turned white in front of her. A rush of whispers rose, many voices overlapping, all repeating her name while pleading, warning, and even threatening. Sophia realized the ship had noticed her. The shadows weren't random. They were alive, watching her, waiting, and testing her every step. With each move down the lower decks, she felt herself pulled closer to answers and danger. At the far end of the hallway, a faint glow flickered, and her heart pounded harder. She walked toward it. The glow came from an old lounge, beautiful once, but untouched for decades. The chairs faced one another in a ring, and in the middle, a single chair rocked softly, squeaking, as if an unseen figure sat in it. Sophia lifted her camera, ready to capture the chilling scene. A voice whispered into the air. "Stay here." Sophia froze. "Stay." The shadows gathered into the shape of a tall, uniformed man, his face hidden, pointing at her. She understood then. They weren't trying to attack her. They wanted her to know something. A disaster had once struck the ship, one the crew had hidden from the world. The voices carried fragments of a ritual, a tragedy, and the horrifying truth that the dead weren't truly gone. They were trapped, endlessly reliving their final minutes. Sophia slowly backed away, the whispers guiding her to the cargo hold. The smell of seawater and iron filled the air. Crates lined the walls, some open, showing belongings of long-lost passengers, uniforms, hats, and children's toys. Shadows slipped across the floor, forming quick faces twisted in fear, sorrow, and pain. The ship was feeding on these memories, keeping them alive in a cruel loop, and anyone who searched too far risked being taken as well. A chill tightened Sophia's chest. From the crates, she heard a child's laugh, followed by an icy murmur. "You can stay with us forever." Her hands shook as she clutched her camera. She turned to leave, but the hallways had changed. Doors once open were now sealed. Corridors bent at impossible angles, and shadows merged into one dark form. She realized then, the ship wasn't just haunted. It was aware. It was alive. And now it knew that she understood. Stumbling forward, Sophia felt the walls breathing, pulsing as if the ship's body wrapped around her. Shadows stretched like dark fingers, holding to her steps. She raised her camera, hoping its lens would catch some logic in the chaos. But each picture twisted into horror, faces melting into endless agony. A sound pulled her attention. Measured footsteps, heavy and deliberate, trailing behind her. She spun around, nothing there. But the echo felt wrong, too precise to be her own. Panic rushed through her chest. At the hall's end, a short staircase dropped into the ship's depths. A faint green glow shimmered from below. The engine room. Crew had warned her never to go down there, but her gut told her the truth was waiting. The air thickened as she descended, a strange sweetness mixed with rust and oil, pleasant yet choking. The whispers were louder now, overlapping, pressing against her mind. Stay, see, join, lost, never leave. She held the railing tight, her stomach churning. When she reached the engine room, she froze. The machine stood rusted and silent, yet shadows danced across them, as though they kept the ancient engines alive by feeding on memory. A pool of water lay in the center, reflecting the ceiling. But the reflection was wrong. Faces stared back. Passengers, crew, even her own, warped and crying out in silence. Sophia spun around as one whisper tore through the noise. "You should not be here." From the far side, a massive figure stepped forward, dressed in a captain's uniform but with no face, its features swallowed by darkness. Its limbs bent unnaturally, its walk uneven. Shadows rippled with its every move, reaching for her. She understood. This was no ghost. This was the ship itself, its mind, its hunger given form. Every whisper, every shadow, every flicker of fear was part of it. The ship had learned, adapted, and imprisoned anyone who sought its secrets. Sophia tried to escape, but the corridors twisted back on themselves, coiling like a trap. Even reality seemed broken. Voices pressed close. "Help us! Stay! Become!" She spun in desperation, spotting an old crate. Inside lay journals, logbooks, artifacts from voyages long forgotten, proof of everything. Her trembling hands reached for a journal. The notes told of vanishings, strange deaths, and a cycle that repeated across generations. Anyone who uncovered the truth risked becoming part of the ship forever, locked in spirit between worlds. "You've seen too much," a voice hissed inside her mind. The captain figure stepped closer, shadows curling around her legs like rivers of black. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came. The walls seemed to close in, crushing her. In a last effort, she threw the journal to the ground. For 1 second, the shadows recoiled. She spotted a half-open hatch leading to the outer deck. The sharp wind carried salt and sea through the gap, whispering secrets and threats. She bolted for it, dragging her legs through the clinging dark. When she burst onto the deck, the storm had worsened. Waves slammed against the hull, drenching her in seconds while the night sky pressed down, starless and black. The ship glowed faintly with an otherworldly light, throbbing like a heartbeat. Sophia knew now, it wasn't just a ship, it was a hunter, and the ocean was its endless hunting ground. All around her she felt the weight of souls, countless passengers, children, and crew, watching, begging, warning her. She spun as a shadowed figure appeared in the water's reflection, closer than anyone should be. But when she turned, it was gone. Her camera, she remembered it. Lifting it one last time, she snapped a photo, hoping it would reveal the truth. But the image showed her own face twisted, her eyes hollow, and the shadows of the trap dancing just behind her. Muscles burning, heart racing, she ran for the lifeboat ladder. Fighting the wind's violent pull, she scrambled down and dropped into the boat. As the Elysian dawn faded into the night, the whispers thinned, leaving only the pounding of her heart. Sophia survived, but she knew the truth. The ship was still alive, still waiting, and still hungry. Whoever dared to cross its path again might be the next one it claimed. Story 4. He wasn't moving when I first saw him, holding an empty tray in his hands. He stood in the middle of the wide foyer, staring at me through the crowd like he already knew me. You can call me Rachel Donovan. I'm a 33-year-old travel nurse from Oregon who rarely splurges on luxury trips. But after 3 exhausting months of nonstop night shifts, I decided I had earned a week-long Caribbean cruise on the Elysian Dawn. It was meant to be relaxing, sunny, and maybe even a little carefree. On that first day, everything on the ship looked normal. Children raced up the stairs toward the water slides. Older couples sat peacefully on lounge chairs, and a steel drum band played near the pool. I actually laughed at myself for being nervous. After all, it was just a cruise, a floating hotel with nothing strange about it. But then I saw him again. He wore the same black vest and white shirt as the rest of the waiters, but something about him was off. His clothes looked crumpled, as if he had slept in them. His skin was pale and clammy, the kind of sickly look people get when they're unwell. And worst of all, his eyes never moved. They were locked on me like a shadow that refused to shift. I told myself it was my imagination and tried to ignore it. But later that night, as I went down to the dining hall, there he was again. He stood in the corner, just beyond where the light reached. He wasn't serving anyone, wasn't moving, just holding that tray and staring. I asked the couple at the next table if they could see him. The husband glanced over, frowned, and asked, "Who?" When I turned back, the corner was empty. From that moment, it no longer felt like a vacation. That night, as I lay in my cabin, the steady hum of the ship's engines beneath me sounded like a heartbeat I couldn't escape. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking. Maybe I had simply seen a tired waiter between shifts. Still, I couldn't shake his face, his silence, the fact that no one else seemed to notice him at all. The next morning, I forced myself to enjoy the cruise. I ordered a drink, walked around the deck, and even joined a trivia game at one of the lounges. For a short time, I almost felt normal again. But then I noticed him outside the glass windows. He was standing on the deck in the blazing sun, holding the same tray. The wind was strong enough to send napkins flying across tables, yet his hair and clothes didn't move at all. I blinked, looked again, and he was gone. By the third night, I could no longer convince myself it was just my imagination. Something was wrong. I even casually described him to a staff member. The waiter laughed politely and said, "Our uniforms change every day, ma'am. No one wears the same one after hours." When I asked again if anyone like that worked there, his face grew confused, as if I were joking. That night in my cabin, I noticed a napkin neatly folded on my desk. I thought housekeeping had left it, until I opened it. The words scrawled inside made my hands shake. "Don't eat." Beneath it, in messy letters, were the words, "He's waiting." My stomach dropped. No one else had been in my room, and yet someone or something had left that message. I thought about reporting it, but what could I say? That a ghostly waiter was leaving notes in my cabin since the first day? I skipped dinner, staring around nervously, half expecting him to appear. For a little while, he didn't. Maybe I hoped he was gone. But midway through the evening meal, when the lights dimmed for the show, he was suddenly there. Not across the room this time, but directly behind my chair, tray in hand, unmoving. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. All around me, people clapped and laughed at the magician on stage, but I heard only my heartbeat crashing in my ears. I turned slightly, just enough to glance back. The chair behind me was empty. No waiter, no tray, just an open seat at a crowded table. The metallic taste on my tongue grew stronger. I forced myself to finish what little I could of the meal before fleeing back to my cabin. I locked the door, slid the chain across, and even left all the lights on. For a while, nothing happened. I started to believe maybe it was stress. Maybe my mind was making shapes out of shadows. But then, close to midnight, the lights flickered once. Only once, but enough to make my stomach turn. Then I caught the smell. It was food, rich and savory, like a roast being carved open. But it was wrong. The scent grew thick and metallic, filling the room like it was seeping through the walls themselves. A knock followed. 3 slow, deliberate taps. My breath came in short, sharp gasps as I pressed against the wall. Something slid under the door. A tray. Not a hand. Not a person. Just the tray scraping across the floor until it stopped in the middle of my cabin. It was impossible for it to fit through the small gap. Yet there it was. A silver dome lid sat on top of the plate. Every part of me screamed not to touch it, but my shaking hand lifted it anyway. No food sat on the plate. Instead, there was a folded cruise manifest. My cabin number was circled in red. Beneath it, written in shaky letters, were the words, "You already ate." My stomach twisted violently. I gagged even though I hadn't touched a bite of food that night. I stumbled toward the bathroom, gripping the sink with trembling hands. When I looked up into the mirror, I froze. He was there. The waiter stood just over my shoulder, tray balanced in his hand, staring at me with empty, pupil-less eyes. His breath brushed my ear as he whispered, "Don't worry. There's always room for one more." I stumbled back, slamming into the wall so hard the towel rack rattled. But when I spun around, nothing was there. Only my pale reflection stared back from the mirror. The tray was gone. No manifest, no plate, no silver lid. Not even a mark on the floor where it had scraped. It was as if none of it had ever happened. Sleep was impossible after that. I sat on the edge of the bed waiting for dawn. The first rays of light brought the sound of footsteps in the hall, voices, and the ship's morning announcements. For a short moment, I almost believed it had all been a nightmare. Clinging to that hope, I pushed into the dining room for breakfast. I scanned faces, checked every server, waiting for him to appear. Each waiter I saw looked human, tired, rushed, but human. Then my eyes caught something chilling. A family of 4 sat silently at a table in the corner. They didn't move, didn't eat, didn't make a sound. Their plates were full, yet they all stared straight ahead, blank-eyed. Standing just behind them, half in shadow, was the waiter, the same pale man holding his tray as if it weighed nothing. No one else noticed. No one turned their head. Eventually, the family stood and walked away, leaving their untouched food behind. The waiter slipped back into the crowd, unseen by anyone but me. That was when I realized something awful. The ship wasn't haunted by a single ghost. Something was feeding here, and the waiter was more than just a server. He was part of it, helping it claim souls. That night, I locked my cabin again. I checked the latch twice, even shoved a chair under the handle. The hum of the ship kept me awake for hours, but around 3 in the morning, exhaustion overtook me. A sound woke me suddenly, the scrape of wood. Someone had moved the chair, the clasp undone. My door rocked gently with the ship's sway, half open. The soft, steady sound of wheels rolled along the tile outside, a serving cart. It stopped at my door. Slowly, a pale hand slipped through the gap, unnaturally long and thin, placing another tray inside before withdrawing. The door swayed shut again. On the tray this time was no manifest, no note, just my passport. A black X scrawled across my photo, and beneath it, a bill. One soul, paid in full. My throat locked tight, no sound escaping. Not because I was brave, but because it felt like invisible fingers had wrapped around my neck. My passport lay beneath the cruel mark, the tray gleaming in the dim light like proof of a deal I hadn't agreed to, but was already part of. The bill was fresh, the ink still wet. My hands shook as I picked it up. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I staggered back, holding the paper, realizing I was trapped in something far darker than I could ever explain. But then I heard it right outside the door. The wheels again, slow, steady. This time they were moving away. I waited for the echo of the sound to fade, then rushed to the door. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly as I stepped into the corridor, but it was empty. No cart, no waiter. The only thing that lingered was a strange smell, sweet and sharp, like burnt sugar. I should have gone back inside, locked the door, and prayed it would pass. But something stronger than fear pulled me onward, a desperate, frantic curiosity that I couldn't fight. I followed the strange smell down the corridor, then down a staircase that led into parts of the ship marked only for crew. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became. The ship didn't feel normal anymore. The hallways were too silent, almost abandoned. I passed rows of cabins that should have been full, with suitcases inside, but there were no people. Each door I walked past had its television on, but every screen showed nothing but white static. Nobody was there to watch. The deeper I went, the stronger the smell became. At last, I came to a heavy steel door, dented and stained, dark at the bottom. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might tear through my chest. I pushed it open, even though every instinct screamed at me not to. Inside was a chamber I had never seen on any map of the ship. It wasn't like the cabins or dining halls. No beds, no decorations. Instead, long rows of tables stretched out like some endless banquet hall. Each table was piled high with food, plates of fruit that never browned, meats that stayed steaming hot, desserts that never melted. None of it looked real, as though time itself refused to touch it. Around the tables sat passengers, dozens of them, but none were eating. They slumped in their chairs, their eyes dull and glassy, their mouths half open as if frozen mid-breath. Some still clutched forks, unmoving, their plates untouched. Their skin looked pale, drained, as though whatever had kept them alive had been pulled out of them. From the far end of the hall, the waiter appeared. His silver tray gleamed in the dim light. But this time it wasn't empty. On it sat a single plate, holding a piece of cake covered in white icing. A candle flickered on top. Written in red across the frosting were 3 words: "This is yours." The flame burned brightly, but the air around it never moved. My chest tightened as the waiter raised his head, and for the first time I saw his face clearly. It wasn't even a face, just stretched, pale skin where features should have been. Hollow pits for eyes, no mouth, no nose, nothing but a blank mask of flesh. He walked with calm, deliberate steps and placed the plate down on the nearest table. Then slowly, his head turned toward me. His words didn't come from his mouth. There was no mouth, but they rang inside my mind. All ships must pay. All passengers must eat. The candle's flame sputtered once, then went out. The room fell into complete darkness. My first impression of the Aurora seas was that I was just taking a luxurious cruise to escape the hustle and bustle of the mainland. This was supposed to be different. My name is Lucas Reyes, and I have traveled the world on business. Something calming, something normal, something safe. People were singing and laughing on every deck of the huge ship, which was gleaming in the port lights. I had booked a single cabin on the 9th deck, a cozy little room with a balcony overlooking the lake, as if the cabin had been waiting for me. There was a little chill in the air when I stepped inside. I threw it away as a draft and started unpacking. As the ship glided into the gentle rhythm of the evening ocean waves, the distant hum of motors seemed soothing. I was alone in my cabin with the balcony doors open and the sea wind flowing in, just outside the cabin door. At that moment, I heard a slight scratching noise. I became icy. At first, I convinced myself it was simply another traveler, a late-night stray maybe, but the sound continued. It went on steady, almost deliberate. I reached for the doorknob with a trembling hand. No one was there, just the empty corridor into the darkness. I smiled uneasily at myself as I told myself that I had been traveling too much and that stress made shadows move. The scratching continued even after I locked the door and shut it. It seemed to linger in the corners of the room. The next morning, I brought it up to the ship's crew. They smiled politely and shrugged. "Sir, ships are old, settling sounds." I was not reassured by their smiles. There was something about their gaze that made them appear too alert, too composed, as though they were also anticipating something. I tried to sleep that night, but the scratching came back closer and louder. I jumped to my feet as soon as I heard the whisper. "Luca." I was so sure that my heartbeat would reverberate throughout the cottage. I had slammed the balcony door shut, but it was open. There was an odd metallic smell in the seaside breeze. Too terrified to breathe, I closed the door and pressed myself against it. The creaking followed. It wasn't the typical ship floor groan, but rather a purposeful sliding motion across the cabin. Something invisible, glancing across the room with my flashlight. I reached for my phone. The shadows moved strangely. The space felt alive, encroaching. I could just make out a faint human-like shape in the corner, standing motionless enough to make me wonder whether I had dreamed it. My voice trembling, I spoke into the night. "Who's there?" No answer, but the darkness was getting closer. By the time I fell asleep in fits and squalls, I knew the ship had captivated my attention in a way I couldn't explain. Aurora Seas was a living entity, not just a journey. It was watching, too. I awakened up to the gentle hum of the ship's engines, but something wasn't quite right. It had been a little cold in the cabin the night before, but now it was freezing. As I rubbed my eyes and tried to shake off the unease, I tried to tell myself that the night before had been a dream or a sign of my travel fatigue. Next, I looked to the balcony. The door was open and the drapes were fluttering violently in the breeze. I was certain that I had locked it. Panic hit me, but as I approached, I noticed footsteps, which was worse. Small, wet, dragging over the carpet toward the corner of the room. I froze, my heart thumping. No one should have been in my stateroom room, much less on the 9th deck at this hour. The phone was dead when I took it up again and tried to call ship security. The deadline had passed. I gazed at my reflection in the mirror. I barely knew myself. Pale, eyes wide, clutching the phone like a lifeline. The faint but distinct voice, "Lucas," returned, and I glanced around. Nothing. All that's there are shadows that twist and stretch oddly along the walls as the lights on the ceiling flicker. My mind was racing. I attempted to think of something that might be explained, like a crew member or a practical prank. But while I was thinking it, the room seemed to come to life, shivering slightly underfoot, as if the ship itself was aware of my presence. I decided to investigate. I followed the faint sound of scuffing down the hallway. The passageway curved slightly and was longer than it needed to be, as if the ship's design had changed. I stopped in front of cabin 923, the door slightly open. I couldn't recall ever seeing a cabin here empty, much less one that was reserved for someone else. I looked inside and saw a room with no furniture, walls that seemed like they had been burned, and a single rocking chair in the center that swung gently. It moved, but no one sat in it. In addition, the name Lucas Reyes was inscribed in characters on the wood. A shiver ran down my spine. My name. This has been written. Before I could make sense of anything, a shadow passed by the doorway behind me. I turned around. The hallway's empty. The lights went out, though, and the whisper reappeared, this time with multiple voices overlapping. "Lucas, come, sit, stay." With my heart racing, I stumbled backward and nearly fell over the balcony railing. But I dared not open it for fear that the ocean itself was watching. I ran back to my cabin and locked the door. My phone was still unusable and dead. I was imprisoned, alone. However, not alone. As the night deepened, every sound, the moan of the ship, the scratching beneath the carpet, the whispers that merged into a symphony of doom, became more and more pronounced. I realized that this was not just a haunting. It was shrewd. The ship knew me and sympathized with my fears. It was eating them too. Hours, minutes, or what? Time seemed useless. Then there was an abrupt, oppressive, complete silence. I inhaled. Then the darkness completely emerged from the corner of the room. Not only a shadow, but a figure, slender, abnormally tall, with arms that extended to the floor, and a face concealed. It stopped at the edge of the bed and gazed without blinking. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I made an effort to speak, but my voice was not clear. With deliberate slowness, the figure moved closer. I grabbed a jacket and hurried to the stairway, praying for light, for someone, for the main deck. As it shouted in a voice like the grinding of metal, "You should have stayed ashore." The walkways were convoluted with doors opening to infinite hallways and steps leading into an uncanny blackness. The murmurs increased in volume and pulled me toward the middle of the ship. As they sang my name, I realized then that the Aurora Seas was not a ship, but a predator. It preyed on me as well. At every turn, I twisted more than I should have as I stumbled through the hallways. The ship felt alive, its walls trembling, the flooring shifting underfoot, the lights flickering in sync with my racing heart. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew I had to get out, had to escape whatever entity had taken control of the ship. The whispers increased in volume and tenacity. They were no longer just calling my name. They were taunting me. The words crept like smoke through the atmosphere and into my head and ears. "Lucas, you can't leave. Stay forever." I eventually arrived at a hallway lined with cabin doors. As I passed by, the windows of each door framed my own reflection, and I noticed something disquing in each. But they weren't just reflections. They were warped images of me. In some, my eyes bled shadows, and in others, my mouth gaped in silent screaming. I tried to turn my head away, but each door drew me in. Then one door at the very end threw open forcefully on its own. I became icy even though the room was dark. The faint illumination from a solitary lantern revealed a horrifying scene. Dozens of personal items, such as clothes, shoes, luggage, and watches, appeared to be carried in midair by invisible hands. They swirled slowly around the room, creating a vortex that seemed to be alive. A second shape then drew my eyes. It was larger, darker, and far more threatening than the shadow I had seen before. Its very presence felt filled with malice. Its head tilted in a strange, unnatural way, and I realized I knew what it was. The word "me" didn't matter. It was a human-like figure, with blank eyes and a smile that looked drained of all emotion, as if it had stolen every fear in the world. Slowly it raised its hand and pointed directly at me. The object floating in the air spun faster, circling me like a violent storm. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet. The air grew so heavy it was hard to breathe, pressing against my chest like something invisible was crushing me. My breath came in short, painful gasps. A memory hit me. Just weeks ago during my vacation, I had read online about the Aurora Seas. Reports of missing passengers, videos showing cabins with no numbers, even stories of crew denying those decks existed at all. Then a terrifying idea struck me. What if the ship wasn't just haunted? What if it fed on people, trapping them as shadows of who they once were, surviving on their fear? The figure's grin grew wider as it stepped closer. "We've been waiting," a soft yet dreadful murmur whispered. I turned and ran, rushing through hallways that twisted back into themselves and stairwells that bent in directions that made no sense. Every door I tried was either locked or open to pure blackness. Murmurs followed me everywhere, some from ahead, others chasing me from behind. Finally, I stumbled into the main dining area. Normally filled with music, laughter, and bright lights, It now glowed with a faint, eerie green. Chairs and tables were stacked in impossible towers, tilting at angles that defied reality. Shadows crept from every corner, and then I saw them. Dozens of people, but wrong. Their faces warped, their eyes empty. All at once, they turned toward me. A shiver shook through me as they began to surround me. That was when I noticed a staircase leading down, where the ship's engine room should have been. A faint light glimmered below. Something inside told me this was the only path forward, the only chance to face whatever was consuming the Aurora seas. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself toward it. The shadows screamed and grabbed at me, their many voices mixing with the ship's humming walls. But I pushed through and descended into the dark. At the bottom there was no engine room, no pounding machinery, no roaring engines. Instead, I stepped into a massive chamber lined with mirrors. Every wall reflected me, thousands of versions frozen in different expressions: fear, agony, despair. And it wasn't just me reflected. Standing in the center, smiling as though it had always belonged there, was the first shadow I had ever seen, now fully formed. My stomach turned cold when the ship's voice echoed through the room. "Welcome home, Lucas." It hadn't just been haunting me, it had been waiting for me. My choices were clear. I could run deeper into the unknown hallways, or I could stand still and let the shadow lead me. The floor shook beneath me like it was impatient for my answer. Forcing back my terror, I bolted toward a narrow corridor at the far end. The mirrors reflected my every move, doubling my fear with every step. The whispers grew louder until a new sound cut through them, a soft voice, almost human. "You can resist it. Stay away from that." Was it a trick or a chance to survive? I didn't stop to think. Whatever waited was too close. I sprinted forward, chasing the faint light ahead. The hallway stretched impossibly long, longer than reason should allow. My heart pounded, lungs burning, but I couldn't stop. The flickering glow ahead wasn't just light. It pulsed like a heartbeat, calling me onward. The whispers grew frantic, mixing into a chaotic chorus. Some begged me to stay, others hissed my name in ways that made my skin crawl. Shadows crawled along the walls, stretching long arms toward me. The floor jolted violently, throwing me forward into a cavernous room not marked on any deck plans. Its ceiling arched high, covered with strange, shimmering residue. Strands of seaweed and the stench of rot mixed with metal filled the air. My flashlight revealed a horrifying sight. Dozens of bodies, or perhaps only fragments of them, suspended in translucent shells. Their mouths hung open in silent screams, limbs twisted, faces frozen in terror. Some were passengers, others crew I remembered seeing alive, all caught in a nightmare between life and death. And then I saw it. The shadow loomed larger than ever, standing atop wreckage. Its body seemed both solid and liquid, changing shape with every movement. Its face shifted into my own features, smiling, and it let out a laugh without words. It raised its arm, pointing directly at me, and I felt an icy pull deep inside my chest. Its voice thundered over all the others. "You belong here. The ship takes what it is owed. You will join us." My legs shook, but I forced myself to run. The room warped, walls rippling like water, hallways folding back on themselves. No matter which way I turned, I ended up in the same chamber. The ship seemed aware of me, anticipating me, trapping me in its nightmare heart. Desperate, I searched for any way out, and then I spotted it, a small ladder hidden behind stacked containers, leading upward. Barely big enough for one person, but it was something. The voices screamed, "Do not leave. Stay." Become fighting the shadows clawing at me, I climbed, struggling against the pull. At the top, I crawled onto a deck I had never seen before. The air reeked of salt and rust. the wood beneath me soft with rot. The sea stretched endlessly, black and violent. Waves smashed against the hull as wind tore at my clothes and stung my eyes. For the first time I felt free, but then it was there, the shadow rising from below the deck, its eyes faintly glowing red. It surged upward with terrifying speed, like a predator rising from the deep. I sprinted toward the lifeboat station, praying something still worked. My heart leapt when I found a lifeboat hanging loose, barely secured. I grabbed a shard of metal, slashed the rope, and climbed inside. To my shock, the engine roared to life. Pushing off into the endless black waves, I left the Aurora seas behind me. But as I drifted away, the ship did not fade into the distance. Instead, it grew larger, its shadows stretching out like tentacles across the water, reaching for me. The whispers built to a deafening roar, then silence. When I finally looked back, the ship had vanished into the horizon, leaving only the dark ocean. I thought I was safe, thought I was finally alone. Then I noticed a ripple in the water beside me. A reflection appeared on the surface, the outline of the Aurora seas stretching across the waves. It was still there, always waiting. Waiting never ends. As I paddled toward a faint light on the horizon, I convinced myself I had survived. But deep down, I knew the truth. Aurora's waters never forget. They are not merciful. They only wait for the next soul. Somewhere far behind me in the black water, I saw my own reflection smiling back, proof that a part of me had been left behind, forever bound to the ship's endless nightmare. Story 6. The ship groaned when I woke, like it was whispering warnings I couldn't quite understand. The air carried the sharp smell of salt and disinfectant, but beneath it lingered a strange metallic tang that didn't belong. My name is Ethan Riley, and I'm a 29-year-old IT consultant from Portland, Oregon. Most of my life has been spent fixing problems for other people, staring at screens, convincing myself I liked the routine. After losing my younger sister so suddenly last year, I needed to escape. A place where the world felt far away, where the endless horizon could blur out the pain. A cruise felt perfect. Somewhere out in the ocean where I could pretend life outside no longer existed. I never imagined how massive the ocean's sovereign would be. Its balconies stacked like a giant tower, decks curving up toward the morning sky. The engines rumbled beneath me, steady and almost comforting, while soft announcements echoed through the hallways, a carefully trained voice rising above the sea's roar. Welcome aboard the Ocean Sovereign. We wish you a pleasant and safe journey. The word safe struck strangely in my chest. My assigned cabin, 7118, Deck 7 midship, had a small balcony looking out over nothing but endless waves. The room smelled faintly of polish and sea air, with towels folded neatly into swan shapes. I unpacked slowly, noticing every detail, the scratches on the railing, the marks in the wood that seemed too deliberate to be accidents. By the second night, the strangeness began. A faint tapping came from deep within the hull beneath my bed. Slow at first, 3 taps, a pause, then 2 shorter ones. I told myself it was just the ship settling, metal shifting with the waves. But when I stepped into the hall, the same taps echoed behind empty cabin doors, following me no matter where I went. Every time I turned, I thought I saw something vanish at the edge of my vision. The other passengers acted like nothing was wrong. Children laughed and ran across the promenade deck. Couples sipped drinks on balconies. Crew members smiled and moved with machine-like precision. I wanted to believe I was imagining it, just grief mixing with loneliness. On the third day, things grew worse. Announcements repeated out of order, some delayed as if the ship itself had forgotten what to say. Lights flickered in deserted corridors. Then came cabin 402. I caught a glimpse through a crack in a service door on deck 4. The room was pristine, untouched, but inside a shadow moved where no one should have been. That cabin, I later learned, had been sealed off weeks earlier. That night, as I sat in the aft lounge staring out at the black water, I overheard a family whisper that an older man who had been near the pool had disappeared. The crew searched, but their calm professionalism felt rehearsed, like they were hiding something more. Later at the buffet, I met Mara. She carried a notebook filled with drawings of doors and hallways, strange diagrams, frantic notes about reflections in mirrors and crew walking through hidden doors. Her voice was shaky but real, her fear matching my own growing unease. She even tried to joke, "If you're listening to this, subscribe to Untold Happenings. It keeps stories like this alive." But her eyes told a different story. That night the tapping returned, louder, faster, almost like a code. I pressed my ear to the balcony door. The sea was silent, endless, a black mirror. Yet from beneath the deck, the hollow tapping echoed again. As the days passed, I began noticing things that didn't add up. Crew members I had seen before vanished, never returning to their posts. Doors I swore I had walked past were suddenly gone, or locked. The layout of the ship seemed to shift each time I thought I understood it. It felt like the ocean's sovereign had its own mind, one that I wasn't meant to understand. By the fourth day, the air itself pulsed with low vibrations, a faint humming beneath the floors that sometimes matched the tapping. At night, footsteps moved outside my cabin, stopping whenever I listened. Reflections lingered in the mirrors far too long, shadows stretching as if the ship itself was alive and watching me. A sudden icy gust swept the room, and the words on the page trembled. Then from the corner of the light, I noticed a tall, thin figure, head tilted as though studying me. Its form was hidden in shadow. When I blinked, it was gone. Something urged me forward even as reason begged me to stop. The journal's pages flipped as though by invisible fingers, landing on a list of names: passengers, crew, dates of disappearance. Some were crossed out, others scrawled freshly. My blood ran cold when I saw Mara's name freshly circled at the bottom. A metallic clang echoed behind me. I spun around, flashlight shaking, but nothing was there. The door slammed shut, locking me inside. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, twisting and moving as if alive. I pressed against the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Leaning close, I heard breathing behind the steel and a low voice whispering from the walls themselves, "Leave, or stay forever." The sound grew deliberate, slow, echoing directly behind me. I turned sharply, but the corridor was empty. The air was freezing now, each breath visible. The scratching surrounded me, restless and everywhere. The ship was changing again. Walls shifted, doors melted into new places. Corridors stretched longer than they should. I realized I was trapped in a maze the ship controlled. My hands fumbled for my phone, but only the dim glow of my flashlight remained. No signal, no escape. From the far wall, a shadow slid faster than any human could move. My body froze, lungs tight, chest aching. The hallways felt endless, each step feeding into another wrong turn. The ocean's sovereign wasn't just steel and machinery, it was alive. I felt its awareness pressing against me, mocking me with a low laugh vibrating through the walls. The diary behind the locked door flung its pages wildly, alive in its own way. In the cracked mirror on the wall, Mara's reflection appeared, eyes hollow, lips muttering, "They take the curious first." Panic took hold and I bolted. The staircases twisted endlessly, corridors wound like knots. Doors slammed, whispers hissed through the vents. Always the engines hummed, steady like a heartbeat. Its rhythm matched mine, both bound in dread. No one on the ship truly knew what it was. And now I understood far too late. It wanted lives, it wanted attention, it wanted me. The tapping returned, sharp, deliberate, like a countdown. Through the endless winding hallways I ran, but the ship folded itself around me, each turn more impossible than the last. The air thickened, burning my chest, my lungs screaming for relief. The tapping followed, steady and closer, resonating through every wall and floor. At last, I stopped at a junction, my back pressed to the cold steel. The lights above dimmed in a slow, deliberate pulse, narrowing like eyes focusing on me. Shadows thickened, writhing against the corridor, stretching beyond natural shapes. The metallic tang I had noticed since the first night flooded my mouth, sharper now, mixed with a rotting stench of old blood and damp wood. Nausea twisted my stomach, but I pressed forward, desperate to understand or escape. Eventually, I found myself at the same service hatch that had first revealed the spiral stairs. I knew I had closed it, but now it yawned open. A cold whisper flowed out, carrying faint voices, almost words. My pulse hammered as I stepped down again. The passage stretched too long this time. At its end, another polished door glowed faintly, identical to the mysterious cabin I had already seen. My breath trembled as I stepped closer. Through the small crack, I saw the same room, the journal on the desk, the made bed, curtains shut tight. But something new was there, a trail of wet footprints, small and fresh, leading to the corner. I froze, holding my breath. A faint stir echoed behind me. Whipping around, I found only the silent corridor, the steady hum of the engines, the steel walls pressing close. Then the tapping came again, this time rapid, uneven, frantic. The sound bounced along the walls like numbers being counted down. My heart slammed violently against my ribs. I had to stay alert. I pushed the door wide open. The room inside looked plain, almost normal, with nothing unusual except for the mirror on the far wall. Then she appeared. Mara, or something that looked like her. Her lips moved, her eyes drooped low, but no sound came out. As I stepped closer, her reflection twisted unnaturally, tilting her head and smiling in a way that made my skin crawl. Suddenly, the lights went out. The room plunged into complete darkness. My flashlight flickered wildly, then died. The ship seemed to inhale and exhale around me, its engines humming louder, alive, almost like a heartbeat. I froze when I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow, careful. They weren't mine. Panic gripped me. I pounded on the walls, shouting for anyone, but the metal swallowed my voice. Desperate, I fumbled for my phone, but the murmurs returned, stronger this time. Not warnings anymore, but commands. Stay, stay, stay. No signal, no light. My hands shook against the freezing steel walls. Then the tapping stopped. A silence heavier than anything I'd ever known filled the room. I held my breath. I wasn't alone. From the far corner, a tall, blurred figure drifted forward, its shadow flowing across the walls, its eyes fixed on me like it was piercing straight into my mind. My heel slipped on something soft. I staggered back, glancing down, onto a corpse. My stomach twisted in horror. When I looked up again, the shadow stretched wider, sliding closer, swallowing the light. The air turned icy in my lungs, a fear so raw I could barely move. I broke into a run, tearing through winding hallways and narrow passages that didn't exist on any map. Every turn brought a new block, doors slamming behind me, exits sealed. Shadows multiplied, whispers followed, proof that the ocean's sovereign wasn't just a vessel, it was alive, and it was hunting. I stumbled into the aft lounge, but even here, where safety should have existed, the shadows curled unnaturally across the walls. I heard cries, soft, broken, impossible to place, coming from somewhere deep in the decks above. A hatch creaked open overhead, and a crew member appeared. His face was blank, eyes empty, body unmoving. He stood frozen in place like a puppet with its strings cut. The missing passengers' names echoed in my mind. They hadn't just vanished. The ship had taken them. It fed on more than bodies. It devoured fear, curiosity, attention, and now it had turned toward me. I forced myself forward and staggered into an unfamiliar hallway. The walls weren't still steel anymore. They pulsed faintly, expanding and contracting like lungs. Then, under the dull red glow of emergency lights, I saw a cabin number flashing weakly. 78. My cabin. But it wasn't my cabin. The furniture was wrong. The walls tilted at odd angles, and shadows drifted where they shouldn't. I pushed the door open. The balcony doors swung with the waves outside, and the bed lay empty. But in the corner crouched a twisted, half-human creature. Its eyes reflected the dim light, hollow yet aware, accusing me with a stare that felt alive. I stumbled back. The door slammed shut on its own. Outside, the hallway had shifted again. The tapping returned, louder now, everywhere at once. Counting, counting, counting. And I realized the ship didn't just steal lives. It trapped thoughts, fears, and attention, feeding greedily. The harder you tried to escape, the deeper it sank its claws. Shadows stretched long across the walls. Whispers screamed in my ears. The corridors folded like a maze of steel and smoke. I fled blindly, the storm above raging, but down here the ship waited, patient, unshaken. I turned another impossible corner and knew with sick clarity I would not leave this place the same way I entered. The ocean sovereign had already claimed me. The only question was how much it would take. I couldn't tell how long I had been running. Time no longer made sense. The hallways weren't steel corridors anymore. They breathed, expanding with each step, shrinking with each pause, alive and aware. Every door I tried led to impossibilities, cabins that couldn't exist, passages that looped back on themselves. The ship had no intention of letting me go. The tapping slowed now, deliberate, purposeful, as though keeping track of me. Counting in my direction. My fists were raw from hammering doors, but the ship shifted ahead of me, always closing what little escape there was. The whispers grew stronger, overlapping, a choir of threats and pleas. Stay forever. Listen. Follow. Then above them all, I heard her, Mara, or what she had become. Her voice came from everywhere at once, echoing in the walls and vents. Ethan, they know you're here. Don't listen. Her tone was terrified but calm, like someone who had already accepted the end. I stumbled onto a balcony I'd never seen before, staring out into the endless black ocean. The stars were sharp, but the horizon was wrong. It never ended. No land, no ships, only water and dark. The waves curled strangely, bending against their own rhythm. Behind me, the balcony doors slammed, and when I turned, the deck had changed. Long, slender shadows glided along the railings, stretching like distorted humans, moving without walking, drifting above the deck. One stopped and stared directly at me, its attention heavy, almost physical. Voices rose in layers, whispers tumbling into screams, muttering turning to chaos. I realized then every door I'd opened, every hall I'd walked, every glance of curiosity. I had been feeding the ship. It was built of hunger, awareness, and memory, and it consumed the living. Most passengers laughed when I mentioned it, brushing it off as nerves. Some crew muttered vague phrases. Ships have memories. Metal resonates. Old vessels act strangely at sea. But their weak words couldn't hide the truth I saw in their eyes. They knew more than they were saying. By the fifth night, the problem had grown worse. Another passenger had gone missing. A man in his 50s had gone to the upper deck, but never returned. The staff searched tirelessly, but every attempt led nowhere. Then I noticed a faint pattern on the floor that stretched from the aft lounge toward a restricted service hatch on deck 4. I felt strangely compelled to follow it. As I walked through the hidden service passages of the ship, the tapping sound grew louder and clearer, almost guiding me toward it. Kneeling at the hatch, I pressed my ear to the steel and heard the steady beat echoing from inside. My chest tightened as I slowly opened it, revealing a stairway descending into darkness. The strange metallic smell I had noticed earlier drifted up with the cold air, mixed with something less identifiable, like guilt or regret. My weight made the steps creak as I descended, and every sound, the distant rumble of the engines, the humming vents, even the muffled laughter of passengers above, echoed strangely together, creating a chilling rhythm that felt unnatural. Then I saw it, a tall, human-shaped shadow moving silently along the far wall, impossibly long and unsettling. The tapping stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt heavier than the steel around me. My mind tried to reason, maybe lights, illusions, or just my nerves, but my instincts told me this was no ordinary ship. The ocean sovereign had a presence. It breathed, remembered, and wanted something. Then in a cold whisper against the back of my neck, I heard, "Don't follow." My legs screamed to run back up the stairs, but something rooted me in that hallway. Something patient, deliberate, waiting. For the first time, I felt I was no longer just a passenger, but part of the ship's haunting melody, moving to its chosen rhythm. I continued deeper, each stair groaning under my weight. Below deck 4, the narrow service corridor was dim and lined with flickering lights. The engine's hum was louder here, rattling through my chest in sync with my heartbeat. Pipes, storage rooms, and old maintenance closets surrounded me, filling the air with the stench of oil, iron, and something I couldn't place. My flashlight trembled in my grip, the beam shaky. The shadow had vanished, yet the feeling of being followed lingered close behind me. The tapping was gone, replaced by faint scraping that echoed beneath the bulkheads. I told myself these weren't sounds empty hallways should make. Pushing open a set of heavy steel doors marked crew only, I stepped into a small chamber lit by faint red emergency glow. Lockers lined the walls, some dented, some ajar, holding jackets, shoes, and even a family photo tucked inside one. My eyes froze at the last locker. Its door swayed open, and for a split second, I swore I saw a pair of hollow eyes staring back. When I blinked, it was empty, just the metallic chill hanging in the air. The ship throbbed with its own heartbeat, announcements faintly filtering through vents, muffled laughter drifting from the promenade deck above. Down here, I was alone with the hum of steel, dripping water, and the certainty of unseen eyes watching me. Clutching my flashlight, I followed a rough path from the strange diagrams Mara had once shown me. She had warned me. The ship had corridors that shouldn't exist. They shifted. Doors appeared and vanished. Sometimes they took people. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice cracked against the hollow silence. At the end of a short tunnel, I spotted a hatch I didn't remember from any deck plans. It was open slightly and a freezing draft pushed out. Crouching low, I pointed my beam inside. A spiral staircase, walls wet with condensation, curled into blackness below. Then I heard it, a faint whisper, distant yet insistent, like someone calling a name I almost recognized. My stomach dropped, but curiosity outweighed fear. I descended, the metallic tang in the air thickening, colder with every step. The scratching noise returned, louder now, impatient. The ship groaned, the stairs narrowing as if squeezing me inward. My flashlight flickered, barely keeping the dark at bay. At the bottom, I entered a small chamber where water dripped from pipes, and oddly, in the center stood a single hut, polished, with a beautiful door more fitting for the promenade deck than this forgotten level. My hand shook as I reached for the handle. The door creaked open silently, revealing an ordinary room. Bed made, curtains drawn, a small desk. But my eyes locked on a journal lying open on the desk. I knew that handwriting. It was Mara's. The page read, "Don't follow. They watch. The ship remembers." Driven by raw desperation, I ran toward the lifeboats at the far end of the deck. They dangled above the water, swaying, cables tight and motionless. I grabbed one of the ropes, burning my palms as I pulled. The rope writhed violently, then went slack in my hands. I stumbled back as the shadows closed in. From the corner of my eye, I saw them, the missing passengers, lined along the railings, eyes wide and blank, staring into the waves. Not alive, not gone, something in between. They raised their hands to me, not to warn, but to invite. My throat burned with the need to scream, to pull them back, but my body froze. Behind me, the balcony glass caught my reflection. Pale skin, empty eyes, shadows curled around me, shapes I couldn't identify. The deck shuddered under my feet as a deep rumble shook the steel, more powerful than the engines. Then the darkness lunged. I slid blindly down a spiral stair, crashing through a hatch into blackness. The whispers were alive here, breathing, wrapping around me. Stay forever. Join us. I tried to run, but the exit was gone. At the bottom, I stumbled into a chamber of mirrors, hundreds of them, reflecting me back in broken angles. Each version moved differently, lips mouthing words I couldn't hear. My heart thundered with the steady tapping, returned once more, counting. From one of the mirrors, Mara stepped forward, her eyes hollow, her voice cold. "It's too late, Ethan. It knows you now." I tried to flee, but the floor twisted, the walls folded inward. Mirror after mirror collapsed toward me, reflection swallowing reflection. Whispers roared louder, drowning the hum of the engines and the sound of my own mind. Somewhere above, I swore I heard laughter, a distant announcement. Something from the ship, I remembered, but out of place here. The Ocean Sovereign was no longer just a ship. It was a predator, a living trap, and every moment it grew stronger. I slammed my hands against one mirror. My reflection stared back, then split as the glass shattered, each shard muttering and accusing. Shadows poured from the broken pieces, wrapping around me, pressing close. The tapping pounded in my ears. A pause, 2 quick beats, 3 slow, then silence. When I woke, I was back in my cabin, or some version of it. The balcony doors swung open, the bed neatly made, the ocean calm. I tried to leave, but no matter which hallway I took, I returned here. Mara was gone. The whispers had faded for now, but at night I still dream of the tapping. The ship remembers, and I know it's still out there, waiting, patient, counting, always a heartbeat away from claiming another curious soul. The Ocean Sovereign does not let go. Curiosity is its currency, and I wonder, as I write this, if anyone listening truly understands the warning, because the horizon stretches forever and time no longer matters here. Days, hours, maybe years, it's all the same. Each attempt to escape only circles back, always to the same balcony, the same ocean. The hum of the engines never stops, a heartbeat, its own and mine. The shadows still move just beyond the light, whispering my name. The missing linger, trapped within its memory, their fear feeding it. My voice is gone, my scream swallowed. Every door leads to another impossibility, and still, somewhere in this endless labyrinth, Mara's voice calls faintly. "Ethan, don't look behind you." The darkness creeps closer as the whispers overlap, louder, sharper, and I realize with horror the muttering has only one message left. You belong here. Stay forever. My headlamp slipped from my hand and hit the floor as I stumbled back, hearing the whispers repeat. Join. Stay. Feed. The shadows rushed forward in a wave, but instead of striking me, they pulled back, sliding toward the balcony doors that no longer opened to the sea I knew. Instead, they opened onto a shimmering, impossible ocean. The waves were unnaturally tall, breaking into countless mirrors that bounced back the light of the night sky. The horizon stretched on forever, but it was wrong. I felt the awful truth hit me. It wasn't freedom at all. The ship had reshaped the horizon into a prison, endless and infinite, wrapped in the illusion of escape. Mara's trembling voice came from beside me as she stepped closer, her words shaking me more than the shadows ever could. Ethan, the ship remembers everything, every step, every fear, every passenger. My mouth opened to ask why, but the words froze. Her eyes locked with mine, and she whispered, "Once it notices you, it doesn't let go." A deep, heavy voice rose out of the shadows, not Mara's, but something older, something hungry. Curiosity is the price. The sound rolled through the air like thunder. Fear feeds. A metallic tang filled my mouth, sharp and choking. The shadows pulsed like one living body, sliding together as though they were a river searching for something. Attention is life, the voice added, wrapping itself around me.